Want to go ahead and get started because it's 7:01 and it's still a beautiful night. So we want to maybe get out and enjoy some of this before you all turn in for the night. My name is Darla Kirchner, and I'm part of the Symbios team. I am here with our panelists of experts and physicians, and I'm going to let all of them introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with Dr. Luther. So, Dr. Luther, you want to say a few words?
Sure. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us for our webinar tonight. As you learned before, as you'll learn afterward, this is a very popular topic, and so we're pleased to pull the panel together tonight and hopefully provide some solutions for you that'll be very meaningful and helpful.
Wonderful. Debbie, you want to say hi?
Hi, I'm Debbie Luther, and I'm one of the nurse practitioners and also Align Health Coaches.
I see Mandy here. Mandy, you want to say hi?
Hi, yeah, my name's Mandy. I'm currently, part of the beautiful Symbios team. I am a personal trainer and I also am easing into the health coach realm as well.
Wonderful. Then we have Marilyn.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Landry. I am a registered licensed dietitian with a master's in nutrition science. And my clinical background is actually in acute and intensive care medicine. But I transitioned out of the hospital and into Symbios because I want to catch people before they end up in the hospital and ICU. So my passion is about leveraging metabolic nutrition to help you reclaim your daily vitality, reverse your fatigue, and live life fully.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Thanks, Marilyn. Look at you. She's our spokesperson. And then we have Melanie. Melanie, you want to say hi?
Hi, I'm Melanie. I am one of the RNs that work at Symbios, and I am part of the Symbios Care team. I do the assessments for the Align programs, administer the injections, do the health history, and the lovely scans.
Yes, she's amazing. I just saw Melanie today. So there. Then I see Vika is next on the screen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria Blinzer, but everyone calls me Vika. I'm the Vice President of Regenerative Health and Wellness at Symbios Health. I'm not part of our clinical team. I'm the person who opens the door when you're ready to take control of your wellness, not just your health. My job is to help you understand your options and guide you to the right team to meet your goals.
And Vika's amazing at what she does, and she's always here to help and support everyone. So, and then we have John.
Hi, I'm John Lippett. I've been with Symbios for about a year now, and I'm one of our physical therapists on the team, as well as overseeing the gym and kind of just overseeing the coordination of Align in general and how we're making sure everything is seen from a holistic view amongst our staff.
Yeah, and John's great too. He's amazing. Everyone on the team is amazing, and it's an honor to work with everyone here. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Let's see. I'm going to go to the next slide. So you've met our team, and Celeste was going to be here, but Celeste wasn't able to join us tonight. So, but I'm sure a lot of you know Celeste and know how wonderful she is too. So we'll go on to the next slide. But basically, one of the things we want to share with you all is please know that this team is amazing. They all very much care. Everyone on the team cares, and we want you to know you're never doing this alone. Okay, so Doc, why don't you take it away and talk about the energy is at the top of the list.
Yeah, that was impressive, Darla. When you sent that survey out, we didn't know really what it said. Some of you have seen Family Feud before, and the survey said energy, fatigue, and that outpaced strength, mobility, staying active, and even balance, and a number of other topics. And so that was impressive. And so we thought we would just lead off our webinar at this time with this topic. And we'll look forward to questions. We did receive a number of questions that came in prior to, and we have those here, and hopefully we can strategically answer those. And so if you have more as this goes on, feel free to post your questions in the chat there. You can raise your hand and we'll try to get to those. If for some reason we do not get to your question tonight, we will be following this up with an email probably early next week, but we'll carefully go through all the unanswered questions and answer those in writing for you. Obviously, if they're very specific of medical nature, we'll try to obviously we'll steer away from that and answer that in a generic way.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of questions around energy and how it relates to everything in the field, and it is amazing to see how all this works together. The other thing I was going to say is in the email, if you could just know that we are recording this, and so you can come back and look at this later, and please share it with your friends so it can help them as well. Okay, so Doc, you want to talk about the 7 essentials?
Yeah, and I want to lead off by saying that my main aim tonight is to give you a tool that you can use to sort of evaluate your fatigue. And I think it's important to understand there is a difference between tiredness, which occurs from normal life activity and is easily reversed when you get the appropriate amount of rest, versus fatigue, which is more of a chronic condition and keeps on going. When we look at fatigue, there are hundreds and hundreds of causes. As I was preparing for this tonight, I was reminded of a time when I was back in my residency at our Grand Rounds table. This is in the early 90s. And a patient was admitted at that time with fatigue. And we had to work these things up and do a differential diagnosis. And the ugh in the room and the dread from behind the curtain of the doctors when they heard fatigue was very, very palpable. And it's always been a diagnosis that's been somewhat frustrating for me just because there are so many causes for fatigue. You almost don't know where to begin. And at that time, our chief resident said, well, I just keep it real simple. I don't get terribly involved. I just recommend that you order a CMP, a CBC, some thyroid tests and inflammatory tests. And if those are all normal, I just tell them to get busy and exercise and eat better. And I thought, well, that's a pretty simple answer. And she was a smart lady. And it kind of helped me sort of negotiate my way through a lot of diagnoses. But as you can see, it just kind of leaves things lacking because there are so many etiologies to this. So I think a better way to approach this is to try to have a framework when you're trying to understand your own fatigue. And at Symbios, we talk about 7 essentials. These are essential to living a full life. And it starts with self-care. The greatest verse in the Bible is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And the second's like the first, love your neighbor as yourself. Sometimes it's very difficult to love ourselves, and it's very difficult to find the care that we need. If you're a high performer, many times you get the last set of care at the end of the day when you just put your head on your pillow at night. So really, really, really understanding boundaries and how to care for yourself is vital. It's critical, and it is essential. The second thing is being connected. The people with whom you're connected, are they loving? Are they encouraging? Are they uplifting? Are they helping you negotiate through life? Or are they toxic and negative and bringing you down? The impact of our relationships is immeasurable, but it's very, very powerful. Thirdly, are we growing in our health? Are we growing spiritually? Are we well connected with where we're going and who we want to be? And I think that is very, very, very important. And then we go through clarity, our mental health, our ability to think and how we think about ourselves. Many times, it's been said that we behave the way we behave because we believe what we believe. Behavior is easy to observe, but we don't always understand why we're doing it. But it's important that we have good thinking in our minds and we think well of ourselves. Are we getting the appropriate rest? Many questions we're dealing with this tonight, and so hopefully we'll come up with those. But people talk about sleep. I read the other day, maybe it was the Simmons mattress company that came up with the fact that we needed 8 hours of sleep at night. I don't know, but there may not be as much science behind that as what we think. And I think many of us sleep in a multitude of ways. You sleep for a few hours, you wake up, get some work done, and get it go through it a little bit differently. But rest is very, very important, and having the appropriate rest you need to reload, recover, and get ready for the next day is important. Nourishment. You're going to hear a lot about nutrition tonight. And lastly, we need to move. We're like car batteries. If you just sit around and don't use your body, you will get tired. So movement is very, very important, and how you do that is also critical. So I'd like you to think about your fatigue through those 7 essentials as you evaluate that, and go from there. Thanks, Darla.
You're welcome. Okay. Come on. There we go. Our next slide is about what we want our patients' experience to be. And this is something that we have been working very, very hard on for several months. And the team has all come together so that everyone on the team is united and connected and believing in these values. Doc, do you want to say any more about this, Dr. Luther?
No, other than to say, when you're connected with us, Symbios, Sim is together and Bios is life. And we've always looked at the patients that come to our office as choosing us to spend time in their life with. And we value that. And so when you look at the connect part of our 7 essentials, we definitely want to be a loving, encouraging, and supportive team for you. And you bring so much to our lives, so we'd like to return that.
Yeah. You can actually hear that in the hallways with lots and lots of laughter and hugs. I think Debbie's got everybody beat on hugs. Okay, so now let's get to our questions. So who wants to go first with questions here? I know there's a lot.
Yeah, there are. I can read off some of these that we have. Marilyn, first off, from a nutritional standpoint, can the foods we're eating actually contribute to fatigue, even if we think that we're eating a healthy diet?
Oh, there, I'm sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself. Sorry about that. So, yes. And so I would say one of the biggest misconceptions is that healthy automatically means energy supporting. So a lot of foods that are marketed as healthy can still be processed, high in total carbohydrates and very low in protein. So for some people, especially those with insulin resistance, that combination can contribute to blood sugar swings, cravings, and an ongoing cycle of fatigue. And one of the simplest ways to interrupt that cycle is to build your meals around protein, include nutrient-dense whole foods, healthy fats, and be intentional about your carbohydrate intake. So many people are surprised at how much steadier their energy feels just when they make those simple changes.
Perfect. And John, this is a good one. A lot of people have pain for a lot of different reasons. How does that affect one's energy?
Yeah, that is a good question. And the way I talk about pain with my patients is I like to think about pain as a bucket of water. And we all have the same size bucket, but we all might be starting with different levels of water in that bucket. But when that bucket's out, we're done. We're tired, we're fatigued, we don't feel good, we have no energy. And everything we do, is either putting in or taking out from that bucket. So if you had a bad night's sleep, if you ate really bad the day before, that's going to take water out of your bucket. Going to work takes water out of the bucket. Doing the laundry for most people is going to take water out of the bucket. And pain is one of those things where if you're hurting all the time, you're going to be tired out. I mean, think about if you've had a bad toothache. That's one of the worst days you can have, and you can't focus. You can't have the energy to do everything you want to do. So, with physical therapy, with just moving more, that's one way to give yourself more energy, because if you can get that pain to at least come down, then you're going to feel better. And another way that pain affects it is if you're unable to do the things that make you happy, that, play tennis, hang out with your grandkids, go for a walk on the beach with your friends. Well, that's less things that are putting that water back into your bucket and giving you more energy. So it really can compound in ways you don't think about.
And Mandy, why do some people feel more tired when they start exercising, even when they know movement is supposed to help?
Yeah, this is such a really good question. A lot of people kind of jump in full throttle a lot of the time and think that, I need to start. And so they put their all into it. They're ready to go and they just jump into it, diving into the deep end. And sometimes, while we want to push ourselves to do the hard things, sometimes we can go too hard too fast. And we have kind of this mismatch between putting in all that demand and finding the balance between the demand and the recovery. So, especially if you're somebody who might already be undersleeping, underfueled, have some stress, or maybe just, like I said, doing too much too soon, adding exercise on top of that without enough recovery capacity is really going to increase that tiredness, that fatigue. And so, trying to find the balance between, how much can I handle and how much rest do I need and how much recovery do I need, kind of this trial and error is really kind of how you're going to get into the motion of what type of exercise is going to be the best for me, and find the adjustment of not being so tired when starting off.
And with that as kind of a follow-up, how do movement habits actually affect uh, how energized people feel?
Yeah, habits are kind of, I feel like, placed in two different ways. Well, movement habits, I would place into two different categories. Just very broadly, I would think about it in kind of short term outcomes and long term. So, if you think about it in the short term, think of things like light activity improving, circulation, mood, alertness, just very brief spurts of that. But over time, the more consistent you are and the more you build those habits with movement, especially, you're going to increase your stamina, your sleep quality is going to improve, your body is going to be able to use energy sources more efficiently. And so, the more you build upon those habits, and even on top of that, too, the easier it's going to be on your brain, on your stress, because habits are these automatic behaviors that we have in our life. And so, that's going to relieve a lot of the thought processes behind this. You wake up and you know that you're going to get a workout in. You don't have to think about, what am I going to do at my, the next day at the gym? What am I going to do if I can't get a workout in? You already have that wired into your system. So, getting these movement habits and building them into your routine is going to completely change the game when it comes to your energy and how, you use that source of energy to fuel you instead of draining you.
That's great. That's awesome. We get a lot of questions about supplements and peptides. Peptides are such a big topic right now. And one of the questions is, will peptides help me? And will you be offering these at Symbios? Vika, can you address that one?
Absolutely. In addition to the PRP and stem cell therapies we already offer at Symbios, we are carefully exploring peptide therapies and targeted supplement support right now. As the science evolves, we're studying evidence, safety, and transparency, building relationships with trusted partners locally and globally. Our goal is to bring these options to our patients responsibly, not chasing trends, but grounded in what truly works. These offerings, when ready, will be through Symbios ARIA, our Advanced Regenerative Innovations for Aging Services division.
Thank you. Yeah, we get a lot of questions on that. And just to assure people, like Vika said, we're deeply researching that right now. One area that really kind of hit the forefront, and we did a webinar on it last fall, Debbie, was about hormone replacement therapy, and lots of questions on how do my hormone levels affect my energy levels day to day, and would it help if I took hormones?
Once again, that's a great question. I'm a proponent for hormones. I believe when they're balanced nicely, women, men just feel so much better. Menopausal fatigue is not just a bad night's sleep. It's a crushing exhaustion that persists regardless of how much rest you get. And most women out there, if you are menopause, perimenopause, you can relate to this statement in some way. Just brain fog, it affects your work, your performance, your activities of daily living. Just that component of low hormones is huge for women. Also, just the emotional depletion of what lowered hormones can do to you too, making things seem so much harder. Just like thinking through thoughts, sometimes women just feel like they're losing their mind, like they have ADHD. those types of things occur, which just zaps our energy and causes a great amount of this, what I call crushing fatigue. And then also physical weakness. When our hormones aren't balanced, we just feel physically weaker. Exercise is harder and sometimes even impossible for women. So hormone balance is critical, and in perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause.
And I would add to that also from a male perspective with testosterone. There again, that has been a very, very valuable supplement. One thing that I've observed in doing this for 35 years, and it's subtle, but once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And that is the industry, the medical industry will attack something that's natural to sell you something that's synthetic. And they'll blame your estrogen or they'll blame your testosterone. And as a physician, when I was training, those were just never, ever discussed in terms of supplementation, unless you were just profoundly, profoundly low in those areas. But what we find as we go through the normal aging process, those hormone levels will actually decline. Notwithstanding, our bodies are exposed to a wide variety of substances in our food supply, in our environment. There's things called endocrine mimickers, where these substances will get in your body and bind your receptors so that your normal levels of hormones don't work effectively. And therefore, supplementing these in a very safe and effective way can be restorative for your energy, for your strength, and for your vitality. One of the questions was, what's a normal level of testosterone? I don't know. There's lab ranges, but what we do at Symbios is we make very personal strategies for your levels. I know what an abnormal level is, and I know the effects of an abnormal testosterone on your blood counts and other things that could be harmful for you. But what we do is we start at a very low dose and try to find out where it is that's going to get you to the level where you feel and function your best. And that's our strategy. That's our goal. And it's not really rocket science. It's just safe practice in a very personal, precise way. But hormones can be wonderful, wonderful things. And it was last fall, the FDA came out and reversed an opinion that came forth from the Women's Health Initiative that for 20 to 25 years denied women just basic estrogen supplementation because it was thought to be associated with breast cancer. And so we're going to see more and more of this in our profession, and it's sad, but it is a system that's built around problems, pills, and procedures. And it's a $4.9 trillion business, heavily driven by the pharmaceutical industry that doesn't care about what you eat, and a food industry that does not care about your health. And so when we start to look at the basic sciences, how we're created as humans to function and flourish, that's when we can kind of take a look and see what our bodies normally have in them, like estrogen, testosterone, and cholesterol. Cholesterol is a molecule of life. So it's just important to understand these things. And many of these things we've been taught differently. But that's what we're here for.
We have a question from Jeff. Can you please explain what a peptide is so that we understand what you're investigating? And why? What is the value of taking peptides?
Right. And so that's a very good question, Jeff. And as you know, that is such a huge topic out there. And one thing that has rung true for me in all of my practice, I may not be the sharpest tool or the brightest bulb, but things just need to make sense. And when I try to get my head around peptides and how they interact with the body as they bind the receptors in our body, and they all have a particular action and a reaction. Well, what our greatest struggle right now is the purity of products and the consistency of those products, and being able to reliably say that this is a very effective product that can give you a reliable outcome. And I think to some degree, in an honest sense, that's where the FDA is too. And there's a lot of things being sold on the market out there. And it's very difficult it's truly buyer beware. And every day that, we come up with a package of peptides and we think this is going to be it, something comes out that maybe just produces a question. Like Vika said, we use a lot of platelet-rich plasma for aesthetics and intimacy and joint restoration, and those can be very effective. But there's over 16,000 research papers written on platelet-rich plasma, and there's not one reported complication. The reason for that is we just take an ounce or two of blood out of you, and then we spin that down and concentrate the platelets that are normally around 200,000 and get those into the billions, and then we put those back into your body. So there's virtually impossible for you to react against yourself, and it's the safest form of regenerative substances out there. It may not be as effective as fat. Fat's just a little more than PRP, and we can do that too. But there's some fun, innovative things that we're really kind of pushing the envelope there and having a good time with that. Stem cells are another thing right now that are very, very, it's up and coming. Robert Kennedy alluded to the fact they may give some deference there and allow people to use those. We're working with a number of, pretty much just one company we've narrowed it down to, but they're very much above the board and really working hard to get the appropriate approvals through IRBs and things like that. But some promising things. You can use those things topically now, and those are FDA approved.
Awesome. Hopefully that answered the question. What other questions do we have?
We have got.
There's a list. Y'all were wonderful.
Yeah, okay. Marilyn, when somebody tells you they're tired all the time, what are the first nutrition factors that you evaluate?
So the first thing that I ask is walk me through a typical day of eating. So I'm looking for patterns and consistency, not perfection. Are they eating enough protein? Are they relying on processed carbohydrates throughout the day? Are they staying hydrated? Have they recently started a medication like a GLP-1, or are they unintentionally under eating or under fueling? So I also think about nutrients, and these play important roles in energy production. So depending on the person and their medical history, that could include iron, vitamin B12, folate, thiamine, vitamin D, magnesium, electrolytes. So deficiencies or imbalances in these areas can contribute to fatigue. And I always want to remind people that nutrition doesn't exist in isolation. So fatigue is really often multifactorial, and nutrition is just one important piece of a much larger puzzle. So I'm not really looking for one magic nutrient. I'm looking at the overall pattern.
Thank you, Marilyn. I have to tell you that Brad said you're the best.
Thanks, Brad.
John, here's one. How does changing my exercise routine affect my energy?
Well, I think Mandy already touched on this a bit, and it takes time. When you first start working out, it's certainly an adjustment, and it takes a while for your body to get used to that. And if you start too intensely, like Mandy was saying, you may feel more tired. You may feel like you overdid it. You may feel sore for a week, and discouraged. But once you get into that routine and it's become something you've done for a few weeks, afterwards you feel better. You have more energy. You're better at dealing with stress throughout the day. Um, you're able to have a little more clarity in thought as well, because you've sort of had time to burn off that fuel and burn off those inner thoughts that maybe kind of nagging at you. And it's really one of those things where it compounds, because usually once you've started an exercise routine, you're also probably going to think, well, now I don't want to go to McDonald's and eat bad. I'm going to eat something good. And then you probably get better sleep. So it really is one of those things that compounds to a lot of other habits that make you feel better.
Thanks, John. That's very helpful. And Mandy, how do I know if my exhaustion is caused by fatigue and sore muscles or it's something else?
Yeah, so not to be confused with the fatigue that we're, kind of centering on here, but there is something to be said about like muscle fatigue and muscle soreness. That is something that's usually you're usually pretty much able to pinpoint kind of exactly where that came from. So, for example, You might have fatigued shoulders, and your shoulders might be really sore, and you wake up and you're just wondering exactly what's going on. But then you reflect and you're like, oh, I did a shoulder workout 2 days ago, so that must be exactly where it's from. Or maybe you think, oh, I slept on it wrong, so that's exactly why my shoulders might be sore and fatigued. Whereas if that exhaustion starts to feel more whole body, is lasting longer than a couple of days, and isn't recovering when you're resting, or even if it's coming with something more, things like maybe brain fog, your sleep is just completely thrown off, you maybe have weakness or other things, even like low motivation, that's probably more than just muscle fatigue or muscle soreness. And then that's where you get into the realm of maybe you need to look into other factors that may be playing a role. Maybe it's, some more stress factors that are doing something, maybe under recovery, maybe you need a medical evaluation to figure out what's going on there. And, just it with that, if it keeps happening or worsens more and more, that's just, that key sign to look beyond training and to get a deeper understanding of what's going on.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you so much.
I have a few questions here that are in the Q&A. You let me know when you can answer them if we have time. Some of them are around food right now, so I don't know who would like to maybe take that on. Just let me know.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Marilyn, why do I get tired right after I eat?
Oh, you're muted, Marilyn. It's okay.
Okay, sorry. So sometimes we see this happen based on what you're eating. So if you're eating processed carbohydrates, a high sugar diet, or overall elevated carbohydrate intake, you may be getting a surge in your blood sugar and then a crash. And then that will drop very quickly and you will feel tired. So that is something that we see quite often, and that's something that we can help you learn how to eat in a way to avoid that big energy crash, that kind of roller coaster that can happen based on what kind of foods you're choosing. So I could, just tag on really quickly, just from another question that I had previously about what's a practical nutrition change um, that you could do to have more consistent energy throughout the day. So a lot of times people plan their meals around a starch, like toast, cereal, rice, pasta, fruit. But I encourage you to flip that thinking around and ask, where's my protein? Right? Where's my protein? So starting with protein is going to help preserve muscle. It's going to promote that feeling of fullness, and it provides much steadier energy than meals that are centered around refined carbohydrates. From there, you want to round out your meal with healthy fats, non-starchy vegetables, and the amount of carbohydrate that's appropriate for your metabolic health and your personal goals. So if you're someone with insulin resistance or prediabetes, actually reducing your total carbohydrate intake can lead to steadier blood sugar, fewer energy crashes, and less reliance on snacks or caffeine throughout the day. But and y'all have heard me say this many times, nutrition isn't one size fits all, but one principle applies to almost everyone. You build your meals around protein and nutrient dense foods. When your blood sugar is more stable, people often notice steadier energy, better appetite control, and fewer cravings. So start with protein.
Awesome. There's one other here around food and fatigue. It's what are some of the misconceptions about food we think helps our fatigue?
Well, I mean, that's a big question because there's a lot of misconceptions around food. I think a lot of people think that quick fix is I have to have a carbohydrate food right now. Like I'm gonna crash. What I tell people is to not have carbohydrates by themselves. You want to pair your carbohydrate food with, make it part of your meal or pair it with a protein fat food, so that you can kind of keep a stable energy. You don't have a big glucose blood sugar spike and then crash. Keep it a more, gentle increase and subsiding of your blood sugar when you're eating. So, but also there's a lot of people that think that they have to stay away from fat, that fat's going to harm them. They think salt's going to harm them. So those are a lot of the misconceptions that we have to retrain our brains and work around. There's misconceptions about how much protein is safe or unsafe. And this is why I think we excel because we look at you as an individual person and we look at everything going on with you. We we do a lot of labs, we do testing, we look at your physical capacity, what's going on with you medically, and we put together a plan that is made for you as an individual.
Great answer.
Yeah, that's great, Marilyn. Thank you very much. And I think, it's very important to understand that the medical school education, although changing, but this generation of physicians and shortly behind me, we received zero or very, very little nutritional training. And the medical school education is heavily influenced by the pharmaceutical industry. And so we leave thinking that everything's a problem and we focus on that. And then we try to treat it with a pill or a procedure. Whereas there's so much help if you just eat sound and nutritionally in a very healthy way and understand the nutrients that your body needs. And I keep it pretty simple. I think about eating out of a field, a stream, a sky, a tree, or a bush. Just make sure they're all clean fields, streams, skies, trees, and bushes. But the food industry is a bazillion-dollar industry, and it feeds you out of a bag, a box, or a can. And so when you start to look at the contents of that, I've had some of the nutritionalists say if it has more than 5 ingredients, it's not food. It's something out of a factory. John, here's a question about overtraining for you. And John is he's a special guy. He's got a certificate in personal training, but he's so driven to learn more about that and how that applies that he got his doctorate in physical therapy. And he is overseeing, like he said, he's the vice president of our Symbios Fit and special programs. But he has just got an incredible knowledge. But on the side too, he's a very, very competitive athlete. And I love going to these events on the weekends and watching him compete. John, what are the signs that you are overtraining?
And like Marilyn said, that's a big question. And a lot of that comes down to what your routines are and how long you've been working out and how well trained you are to start. But I think in general, excuse me, some ways you can tell if you're overtrained is really looking at more of a couple of weeks window. If you wake up for 2 days in a row and you feel low energy, you don't want to work out, maybe you have less quality workouts, that could just be a sign that you didn't sleep good for a couple nights, you didn't eat well for a couple nights, you overdid it, and maybe you just need to take a day off. A general rule I like to follow is if I wake up one day and don't want to work out, I'll do it anyways. If I wake up the second day and I don't want to work out and I still feel tired and exhausted, I'll probably give myself a day off or just an easier day. um, Another thing to think about is, are you doing high intensity CrossFit style, very difficult workouts that really exhaust you every day? You need to give yourself time to recover as well. So that's where the sleep and nutrition, and even mobility recovery exercises become important. There are more scientific ways now that, a lot of people are talking about HRV, heart rate variability, to track your recovery. Heart rate variability is essentially the time between heartbeats, which is only going to change in a matter of milliseconds. But the idea is if your nervous system is more restored and has had time to rest, you have a higher variability. Your heart is reacting differently, versus a lower heart rate variability might mean you're overtrained and exhausted.
Thank you, John. And Mandy, there's a question here about sleep and asking, are there any tools or tricks that can help me get back to sleep? I wake up between 3 and 4 in the morning, my mind races, and it prevents me from getting back to sleep.
Yeah, that's gonna be like, where I mean, I personally love habits, and I think building habits can be really helpful in situations like this, and that's gonna be really individual. So, building tools that are kind of very personal to you in what help you feel relief from stress. So when you wake up in that kind of situation, it's usually because you have something, you're ruminating on, or you have some sort of stressor on your mind, or you're feeling anxious for some reason. It's likely that you have something going on that's like causing you some additional stress, that's making you wake up a little bit in a forensic state, and you can't fall back to sleep due to that. And so finding different ways to cope through that. So maybe, you try and build a habit of, if you wake up at that time, instead of checking your phone, you start to, this is a silly one, but I do this and I swear by it. I count sheep, or I start to, play a melody in my head, like try and, do a routine of a tune in my head to kind of distract myself from the thoughts in my mind. I'll find another way to get my mind working to tire it out in a different version of what it's currently doing, because your mind is distracted by something that's taking your attention and causing you to wake up. If you look at your phone, that's going to make you wake up even more. If you continue to think about it, you're going to continue to wake up. But if you find a way to distract yourself from those thoughts and build a habit out of that, not only are you going to find yourself waking up at 3 a.m. one morning and automatically get into that routine of finding a distraction, but you're going to find that you're going to be kind of avoiding doing that from now on, because you're going to know that you have this stress relief when you wake up and you have these ruminating thoughts, or, before going to sleep, you already know that you have a plan in place if that happens. So you might not even start waking up at that time in the first place.
Thank you. And sleep is very, very important. And that's, one of our 7 essentials is getting enough rest. And as we study sleep science, there are so many inputs to that, but notwithstanding the fact we're all created differently. And, there's some people are monophasic sleepers where you put your head on the pillow at 10 at night and you don't wake up till 6 in the morning. Some people are biphasic where you put your head on the pillow at 10, you wake up at 2. That's more like me. I get up and I'm very productive at that hour of the morning. I just go back to bed for a few hours and get up and go. And then some people are polyphasic sleepers where they kind of sleep a little here and a little there. And so I think a big part of this is really kind of trying to understand yourself. And there's a lot of wearables out there now that you can, kind of track your sleep. And most of those are, they have some objectivity to them, but they're not perfect in and of themselves. But just there's so many variables to sleep, keeping your room cool and dark, making sure that you use your bed just for sleep and marital relationships. Don't have TVs, don't have screens. All those things can be stimulating your mind. Um, and of course now, everybody's talking about cortisol and surge. It's kind of funny to see those social media things go around, and cortisol is kind of the big one now. It's almost impossible to check unless you're sitting there with a needle in your arm or have somebody like a nurse right by your side. Like Melanie, she does all of our testing when we work people up for these conditions, and we try to figure that out. So you'd almost have to draw it right there in the morning, like trying to find the mouse in the house. Debbie, here's one on thyroid issues and premenopausal hormones. Can you talk a little bit how that could play into fatigue?
Well, thyroid is a hormone, and when you're in perimenopause, the perimenopausal state, that just means that your hormones, your natural hormones, are starting to calm down. But then you can also have surges of those hormones that go up high one day, go down one day, so they're just fluctuating. And in my pod, there's this really nice picture of what it's like to be in perimenopause, and it's just like static everywhere. It's just like a bunch of static, and it's true. So as we said, cholesterol is the regulator of those hormones, and then underneath cholesterol, you have on one side of the pyramid there's progesterone, and under progesterone is your thyroid. So oftentimes too, we look at all of these hormones when we're trying to balance them, or we look at all these levels, and if the progesterone is very low, that can affect the the thyroid hormone. So yes, trying to balance the other hormones, the estrogen, the progesterone that can help support the thyroid is a big deal. And thyroid low or high can be a big producer of a lot of fatigue. So we look at all of those hormones in general and then try to come up with a good plan and then supplement where we need to. And sometimes that does help increase the thyroid production as we increase other hormones.
And Debbie, along this, there's a number of questions here, like on chronic disease and people that have had cancer and chemotherapy and radiation therapy and treatment and things along those lines. In your practice, how do you see that chronic disease and perhaps a cancer successfully may be treated, but someone that went through chemo, how might that impact somebody's energy?
Well, the treatment for cancer in of itself just produces a fatigue because that cancer treatment not only kills the cancer cells, but it kills the good cells, the mitochondria, and that mitochondria, of course, then drives the energy of our cell. So that those cancer treatments are a huge deficit. But once someone has recovered from them and getting hormonally balanced, that can be key to just their overall well-being. It depends upon what kind of cancer. We just take every patient individually and look at them, and then just support them at the lowest level possible until we can reach a therapeutic goal for them where they feel well.
Yeah, and along those lines, with chronic disease, there's a question here about how can blood pressure affect your fatigue. But what you find is that so many, chronic disease is the world's most vexing problem. Like I said earlier, medicine is a $4.9 trillion business. And 80% of us will leave the planet with a chronic disease. That's something like heart disease, stroke disease, kidney disease, diabetes, obesity, Alzheimer's, or cancer. All of those are showing roots in what Marilyn referred to earlier as insulin resistance or prediabetes. And for most of it's due to an overabundance of sugar and carbohydrate consumption that our bodies just can't handle, largely from a standard American diet or a heavily processed food industry. And when that happens, your body starts to react in a way that it can't keep up with that, and it can't make enough effective insulin to control that sugar. And the Women's Health Initiative study shows that sugar is 10 to 11 times more likely to cause your heart attack and stroke than cholesterol. And so when you consider the effects of sugar, and that has even now got its roots in hypertension or high blood pressure, as your kidneys are exposed to the sugar, your body makes, not your kidneys, but as your body's exposed to sugar, your body then makes insulin, and that insulin then works on the level of the kidneys to retain sodium, which then creates a higher blood pressure. So all of that leads to dis-ease, which then can show up in signs of fatigue. And so that's kind of how that happens. And, one of the questions here is, please discuss the role of vitamin B12 in energy. There was a time in an era, it was almost a little before I got into practice, where people were just getting B12 shots like crazy. We give out a lot of those in our office, a lot. But Marilyn, how does that affect, when you think about nutritional, how does B12 come into play there with energy?
Well, so, okay, supplements really only resolve fatigue if they're directly addressing an underlying deficiency or an imbalance. So megadosing B12, if your blood levels are already optimal, that's not going to provide you extra energy. That's not really going to help. So B12 is really important for red blood cell formation, neurological function. So if you have a severe deficiency, you can have megablastic anemia, and that would give you profound exhaustion. Um, so B12 shots are interesting because they do bypass the digestive tract, and there are people who have issues absorbing B12. If, for instance, a lot of people who are insulin resistant, or if you're taking certain medications like metformin, some of the proton pump inhibitors, if you've had bariatric surgery. So there are people, if you have an altered digestive tract, you're not going to be able to absorb it as well. You could have not the right amount of intrinsic factor for absorption. So there are real things that can contribute to a B12 deficiency. And we will test your levels when you come in. And again, though, I think that people try to use this as a panacea. And when you're megadosing B12, when you're not really deficient and your levels are already optimal, it's not going to make much difference, but I suppose someone can make some money off you. So, mhm.
And speaking of that, it would be so nice, as humans, and even as physicians, a lot of doctors, it was impressive to me. Admittedly, so I went through a time in my life, I didn't think too much. I just wanted the answer to make you better. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of medicine is practiced that way. And as patients, I'm a patient too. It'd be nice if I knew, just give me a B12 shot, my energy will go back to, I'll be able to leap to tall buildings in a single bound. But it very, very, very rarely is that. And our body is so complex. And that's why we give you that model there, looking at those 7 essentials to evaluate yourself. That's a very, very good tool to try to understand, maybe one of the areas of your fatigue. But uh, like Marilyn said, we check that B12. Melanie is our nurse in Symbios Align, and she's on the front lines every day of testing for these things. And I just want you to hear from her kind of the way we approach a patient that comes in that is low on energy. And can you share kind of the things that you do, Melanie, and the tests that you get?
Sure, sure. So typically I start by going over their health history. I just make sure we know what kind of allergies they have, what kind of medications they're on. I do ask them about their diet. I ask them if they have any kind of limitations when it comes to physical movement, just to make sure that we have a full picture on that. Then we get them up on the scanner, which is basically looks at your body composition, and it'll break it down in both percentages and in pounds. It looks at your fat mass, your lean mass, and that's what includes your muscle mass, your bone mass. It has even your visceral fat, which that's that internal fat that's around your organs. It just gives us a really nice tool to kind of watch your progress through programs that we have. It really helps people see how, even though maybe things aren't changing on scales, if that was their concern, they can see it in loss of inches and just changing of their body, how they're basically redesigning their bodies. We do a bunch of labs, bunch of blood work. It checks all the normal labs that you like to see, your chemistries and your CBCs and your thyroids and your cholesterol levels, but it also looks at um, your hormones. It has your B12 folate level in there. It also checks your vitamin D. It checks, we always do a urinalysis and an insulin level just to kind of see where you are. But it just gives the providers a full picture of, where you are and where they need to work at to get you to where you want to be.
Thank you, Melanie.
Yeah.
And that's very good, because that sets up the table that if anything is suboptimal, the first order of business is try to optimize that area of the body that needs more assistance. And everybody understands that if you hurt your right leg and you're trying to play a sport, that will limit your ability to really perform at your very, very best. But you can build up the other parts of the body and try to overcome that at times. And same way it is with metabolic abnormalities and hormonal abnormalities or body composition abnormalities. Lean muscle tissue is becoming the tissue of vitality and longevity, whereas fat is the tissue of disease. And your bathroom scales don't really show that. And then there was a question about, meditation, sound therapy, science, and things along those lines. And we kind of look at that too in order of self-care and trying to relax the body. Our bodies are driven by two parts of an autonomic nervous system. One is the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight, flight, and freeze. That's the stress system. And the other is parasympathetic system, which is more of rest. when Mandy was talking about counting sheep at night or doing things to pull the mind off of that. There's also a technique called parasympathetic breathing or box breathing, where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, out for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds. And you can just go around a box like that and you can almost feel your body calm down. Heart rate goes down, blood pressure goes down. Those are all wonderful self-care techniques to do. So
Awesome. Great answers to these wonderful questions you all have. We've got about 5 minutes left. Is there any other big question, big burning question that we need to have answered, or anything from the list? It's amazing how fast time goes.
I have many chronic conditions, Debbie. I've got high blood pressure, cholesterol, and diabetes, and I'm on many medications. How might that affect my energy level if I take all these medications?
Wow, I like that question. My mind is very simple, but I like to share with patients that have, that want to listen, that red blood cell that your body makes in your bone marrow is supposed to live 120 days. So think about that flowing through the bloodstream. That red blood cell is giving you oxygen, it's giving you energy. There's mitochondria in that. It's a beautiful, beautiful red blood cell. And it's supposed to live, like I said, for 120 days. So let's take one problem. Let's take diabetes, a chronic disease, illness. So when you get that molecule, that big fat molecule in there in the bloodstream, and insulin's chasing it, so you've got insulin in the bloodstream, you've got that big fat molecule in there, you've got all this stuff competing with that nice beautiful red blood cell that's going to the liver, that's going to the kidneys, it's going to your lungs, it's going to your tissue, down to your feet, down all your vasculature. Here it is, but it can't compete in that bloodstream with that big fat molecule, that diabetes molecule, and all the insulin. So that nice red blood cell gets drowned out by those bigger ones, like the diabetes. So therefore, that molecule that's supposed to live that red blood cell that's supposed to live 120 days gets drowned. So what's giving your body that energy, that insulin, or that oxygen? Because now it's been overtaken by your chronic disease of diabetes. So then what happens? You're fatigued because your cells aren't getting oxygen, your body's not getting oxygen, your limbs, your legs, you're like, shoot. So then what do? We go to the kitchen and we eat, but we eat something that's easy to eat, like another carb, thinking, oh, that'll give me some energy. You just make the cycle worse, because when that carb hits the bloodstream, it turns into sugar, and then that sugar once again builds up, builds up, builds up. Insulin tries to chase it, but nothing works, because that poor old red blood cell that's had the unfortunate advantage of living with a diabetic person is now dead. So another one can't get made until another 120 days. And that's what it's like with chronic disease. It just perpetuates itself, and it just keeps on it just keeps on destroying your good red blood cell. So if we can think about it like in a very simple way like that, and how important it is, like Marilyn said, to eat well, like John and Mandy said, to be energized, to walk, to exercise, it all fits together in that beautiful homeostasis of our body, keeping that red blood cell alive like it should for those 120 days, and trying to avoid the high blood pressure, all those things that just damage our body through that chronic disease pattern that kills our red blood cell. I don't know if that helps, but I hope it does.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Vika, one last question. If I wanted to get a workup and dive deeper on my fatigue, what should I do to go about that?
The first thing you need to do is just contact me and schedule time so we can get together or speak over the phone, and I will be happy to share all the steps that we can offer to address not the fatigue, but many other ailments for a healthy, happy, and beautiful life.
Thank you.
we've added here Vika's, if you want to take a picture of this and scan it in, it'll go right to her calendar and you can set up a meeting with her to discuss anything, any of the questions that you have on any of our services and programs. We've been very, one of the things that the team is doing is really, we are one big connected team. We believe in everything that you see here and everything that Doc has shared with you about the 7 essentials. And we're here to help you and to serve you. And so we appreciate your all's time. Brad says thank you. He's very thankful for us, and you're changing lives one at a time. Bless you all. That's a
Thanks,
beautiful way to
Brad.
end.
Yeah, it is. And our motto is to live life fully. Life is more than health. And your health will either enhance the life that you want to live or it will interfere with that. And what we would like to do is work with you, Symbios, to help you live the fullest life that you want to live. And we do that by helping you transform personal habits to enhance your daily living. Thank you so much for joining. God bless and look for the follow-up email.
Thanks, everyone.